Welcome to Built by a Boss. I'm your host, Evelyn Brooks, journalist, award-winning producer, author, founder of In My Solitude LA. On this podcast, you'll hear unique origin stories, growth strategies, and meaningful insights from successful female founders and entrepreneurs who are leading conscious businesses and creating groundbreaking careers with intention. On our show today, Attorney Rebekah Rounds. She's an expert in air and space law and also co-chair of the Space Law Committee for the American Bar Association's Sci-Tech Committee. She's talking to us today about why we must pay attention to the politics and economics of space so we can protect the Earth and also reap the benefits of financial opportunities that exist in this industry right now. Thank you and enjoy the conversation. All right. Hi, Rebekah. Welcome to Built by a Boss.
Hi. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for having me.
First of all, I'm so excited to talk to you today because you truly represent what our show is all about. Women who are on the cutting edge of what's next in business and entrepreneurship. Now, in your case, it's truly the final frontier. And if you're a Star Trek fan, you know the final frontier is space. But what a lot of us don't know is that space is one of the fastest growing sectors of business in the world. According to a Bank of America Merrill Lynch study, the space sector could be worth $2.7 trillion by 2045. So for me, what's so exciting about this is that we know there are treaties, but there are not a lot of laws yet. And as of today, roughly 550 people in the entire world have actually been to space. So, the other thing that's so wild is that a trip will start at about $250,000. So here's the thing, Rebekah, this is a huge opportunity, I think, based on everything I'm reading, for us to rewrite the rules, shape the laws that regulate space, and give everybody a chance to participate financially in this new world.
This is the best time right now for this burgeoning field because billionaires do have this capability. We've got Elon Musk, we've got Jeff Bezos. You know, Jeff Bezos invests $1 billion a year of his Amazon stock. What he's doing for space right now is creating the capability to create technology that's going to allow us to, get out there, be more involved in space and go further than we've ever been. We've got Richard Branson who, he's trying to get space flight going, and it's an amazing time. And Elon Musk has all of his ideas going, and he wants to go to Mars. And if you look at Elon Musk, everything he's doing is really going to be beneficial for him if he does get to Mars. He's got the Boring Company, he's got SpaceX that's going to allow for space flight. He's into solar. People joke about the Tesla truck that just came out, but things like that are going to be necessary when he's establishing something on Mars or trying to live on Mars. When there are investors, further innovation can come out from those investments. It nurtures this entrepreneurial mindset of developing what can I do in space.
But for a very long time, there was really nothing in space for us to create laws around. But today, the US alone has about 2,000 satellites in space that are connected to basically everything we do, from our bank transactions to Sirius radio to all of that. And then the idea of recently, the president basically created a new branch of the armed forces called the Space Force. So something has shifted. We now have something to protect. What is that in your mind? And how does it change how we move forward with our allies, with Russia and China, knowing that they also now have the capacity to be able to knock our satellites offline. We've moved beyond let's all figure out space together. Now we are seemingly working from a place of we have assets to protect in space now.
Right. Well, and that's a really interesting question, Evelyn. Space has always been used for defensive purposes. President Trump has been so vocal in moving the Space Force along. I think that a lot of the rhetoric that's gone into the way it's been presented from the president and his party has been a show of force in some ways as well. I'm not personally opposed to the Space Force in that you're not going to want all of this investment without protecting that investment. You know, it's like a businessman wants to know what the risks are, or a businesswoman wants to know what the risks are when they're investing their money.
What role is business playing in kind of pushing this whole idea of the development of the space industry forward?
The economics of making sure that your civilians are okay and your nation is continuing to thrive is really important. But that leads into other questions, and really important questions as to, well, if we've got the money to get to space, what's happening to those countries that don't?
Right.
And, you know, are we creating this continuation in this cyclical power struggle between the haves and have-nots? And are we creating a greater divide, or are we able to really develop this capability that we can see the value of space and create better lives for everybody here on Earth?
Yes, we do need innovation to move people forward. But then we also have to ensure that it's a global effort so that the countries that are outside the three who actually have the capability to get to space, that they also benefit and that they are able to speak the language of technology, so that they're just not ultimately receivers of a service. So you know what I mean? So they're
Right.
basically purchasing whatever technology comes outside of space from space, but they can't actually benefit from the creation of it because they're not trained to. And then it takes us to a place of, well, we understand that there are certain individuals now who have the money to kind of lay the groundwork and the foundation for what's needed for us to get to space and to create this technology that improves all of our lives. But then it's also the balance of the environment that may be damaged as a result of getting to space. I saw one quote that said, "Water is the oil of the solar system." And I just thought that was just like, okay, so what that means is that they're doing everything they can to figure out how to get water, because if you don't have water on the moon, then we can't survive there anyway. But then what is the cost to those folks that are left behind? Who is left behind? And then how do we manage kind of like the human rights element of it? Like, who actually gets to go? Who gets to benefit from all of this?
Yeah, and that's a really important question, because several years ago, there was the issue of, you know, not every country can get satellites to space, and it's an ongoing issue. But the question arose: certain countries, you know, just didn't have capabilities to get satellites to space, so they were dependent on these other countries for their communications capabilities. Now, there are some companies that are really interested in creating constellation satellites that provide internet service and communications capabilities to those countries and, you know, around the world, third world countries or developing countries that don't have those capabilities and communication opportunities. But it's been said that the first person that goes to and mines the asteroids is going to be a trillionaire, you know, the world's first trillionaire or whatever. But that leads to the question of, you know, where is sovereignty? Is sovereignty in just the fact that a country is not taking ownership of the asteroid, but they're allowing a company to mine the resources in a particular asteroid? Or the US in 2015 passed a law that allowed for asteroid mining. And the US called on the law of the seas to identify the differentiation between sovereignty and the use of resources from a particular area.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. The idea is that if I am the first person to get to space and I come upon, I guess this was the old idea. If I come
Mhm.
upon any type of resources, I cannot take ownership of those
Mhm.
resources and take them back. And then, now everybody's a trillionaire in the United States. But now
Mhm.
with this new act, so to speak, it's the loophole is that private companies can now go in and do it. And so
Mhm.
that's what's kind of raising the red flag, because it's kind of like, it reminds me of kind of the whole Christopher Columbus thing. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
um, I got there first, even though, and we don't know if there's like other life there or not. That's a whole nother conversation that we're not going to go in. Like, why is he really sending the Space Force there?
Yeah.
But who's to
Right.
say? They have not established themselves as, being there
Right.
first. So I don't know. But it has a little bit of like colonizer vibe to it. And
Yes.
so then you're
Oh,
just kind of
absolutely.
like, okay, I get there first. I see the minerals and the meteorites. I take them. I claim the space. And now I have a military to kind of protect the space, and everybody else is kind of like out of luck. So it's
Right.
kind of like, how do we ensure, as we talk about all of the things I'm reading about, like the businesses that are happening, like space
Mhm.
hotels, space tourism,
Yeah.
solar powered satellites, space based
Mhm.
internet services. Like, there's so much
Yeah.
opportunity to anyone that's listening going forward. Like, how do we ensure that there is any type of level playing field while the gold rush is happening? Because then it becomes
Mhm.
a moment when the access, the bar is high now, right?
Mhm.
But I imagine it will get even higher in terms of trying to enter and really kind of participate. So
Right.
what's in place, like in terms of the laws? Like, how can
Mhm.
we set it up so it's not just a repeat of the Constitution that says women can't vote and
Mhm.
Black people are 3/5 of a person? How do we
Mhm.
shape the
Mhm.
narrative in a different way so that we can all participate in a way that's
Mhm.
mutually beneficial for everyone on the globe?
Right. Well, and that's the crux of the matter, because when the U.S. passed this law, domestic law allowing for asteroid mining, the international community was very upset and continues to be, with the same idea in mind of what you're talking about. Of, once again, the entity that has the most power and the most money is going to go and take advantage of the resources, and the rest of the world is going to be dependent on that entity, and that entity doesn't always do, many times does not do what's right. And I'm not just trying to focus on the US. There are other countries that have, around the world, who now have space policy, who have supported the same idea of asteroid mining. So there is this back and forth based on, what's going to happen when the people that have the money are creating this greater divide, right? And are they going to do what's right, or are they going to just support those in power and those that have the money? But at the same time, there are ways to manage, especially when there's such a great and like this immense amount of wealth versus those that don't even have water.
Hmm.
The divide between those that don't have water, those that don't have food, those that don't have education, don't provide education, or just don't have the capability. Haiti is still dealing with the aftermath of the earthquakes. So, what I would like to see, and I would like to see the narrative move in the direction that when countries go to space and glean from the resources in space, yes, they do get a return on their investment, but they also support a fund to support education. But again, you're right. Water is going to be the oil of outer space. And one of the reasons for that is for propulsion capabilities. When we're in space and doing things in space, and there are outposts being created in space, and the moon's getting colonized, and we're trying to go between planets and do exploration. And, every time I think about space and where we're going in space and how space could end up, I have this thing in the back of my mind thinking, man, I hope it doesn't get to the point where it's like the Hunger Games, where, the Capitol has all these people who are thriving and surviving, and there's people starving, and we have all of these resources, and we're leaving people that are starving. And that's, and some people may say that's silly, or, whatever, but we're seeing that
kind of
happen.
there
Seen
in
that
many
happen through
places.
history. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
not like a stretch to say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we talk about participation and we talk about, that kind of worst case scenario, can you describe what some levels of participation might look like? So if I'm looking at and I'm saying, okay, this is going to be $1 trillion industry, how do I prepare my child in terms of education? I mean, and talk about your path. How if I'm in my 20s entering my career, or like, how can I get ready for kind of like that next opportunity with technology in mind? Maybe I'm not going to be a part of that wave of folks that, get to Mars or the moon, but maybe there are companies now that I can watch or that I can invest in, or maybe there's an aspect of the industry where I can carve out a niche or start a business. Where is the opportunity for the person that is not a billionaire, who cannot start a company on that level, but still wants to find a way to become a part and participate in this burgeoning economy?
Oh, that's a really great question. As Michelle Hanlon, who is another space lawyer, and she actually is the co-founder for All Moonkind, which is a nonprofit. She has said that everything that's done here, and she consistently says everything that's done here on Earth is going to be done in space, and the capabilities are there. To bring it back to just an example from my own life, I didn't have a strong science background. I went to school late. I went and got a communications degree, wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it. I wanted to become an attorney, a quick way to get there. Went to law school, was hoping to do something in the international realm, dealing with intellectual property or dispute resolution, or, international human rights. And then all of a sudden, my third year of law school, I ended up as a legal fellow for the chairman of the space subcommittee on Capitol Hill. And he had a female rocket scientist on staff who was running policy for him.
Nice.
And her name's Megan Mitchell. Yeah. Her name's Megan Mitchell. And she's now, she's been with Blue Origin and does a lot with government relations, but she just started giving me some research to do. And I really started getting into it because it was an area I'd always loved space. I've told this story many different times, but, I was walking across the school grounds one day and just walking past the big kids, and didn't want to walk past the big kids, and just wished that the Millennium Falcon would come and get me, and take me away from that. Right. I know it's just, but like, I've always had this real interest in space, and lived with an aunt and uncle for a time period. And my uncle was very much into, and is still very much into, Star Trek, and being around that interest in space and where we can go in space and what's happening in space. That was always an interest. I always liked to read sci-fi and do all this stuff, but never thought, because I wasn't a STEM background, wasn't mathematically, I wasn't gifted mathematically. I actually had a lot of problems with math growing up, and it was a real challenge for me. But here, I'm working on as a legal fellow on the Hill, and really get this spark for space law because it's an area being carved out. It involves international law and dispute resolution and intellectual property issues and, human rights issues. And I was like, wow, there is a place for me in the space realm. And I give that example because everything we're doing here, we're going to need to do out there. We are going to need horticulturalists. We are going to need those biologists, scientists, social scientists. We're going to need the people to know and know how to deal with anxiety issues, health issues. So there is going to be a place for everybody that wants to be involved in space matters. Now, how does that tie into business and what we're doing in business and entrepreneurialism? Well, if you like fashion, I've seen presentations on what fashion is going to be like in space and the development of that. So maybe fashion right now isn't going to have its place, but believe me, when people are going more and more into space, they're not going to just want to look like they're just wearing a spacesuit, especially those people that have $250,000 to fly into space.
Well, we just saw what the Space Force outfits look like.
Right.
So they're going to be fashionable, right? So
yeah. So, right. If you're interested in space, what I would recommend, and you don't know what to do or how to get involved in it, there are some really great conferences with brilliant people who are coming up with new ideas and developing those new ideas, new space. There's a conference in Seattle every summer, but there are new space conferences all over the world. If you're interested in law, get involved with the ABA Space Law Committee or the SciTech Committee on Space Law. If you're interested in software development, find a company that's doing things in software development. There are opportunities out there. Get involved in what's happening in the new space arena by going to these conventions, reaching out, reading the articles. Political Europe came out with an article that talked about the difference between U.S. entrepreneurs in space and capital raising in Europe. And the difference is, the U.S., we understand that there's going to be failures and we're not afraid of failures. And this article was talking about how, a lot of times in the European countries, if you fail, then you're shunned and you're not given further opportunities. So find the arena that will best support what you're trying to do and then move forward from there. Come up with an idea. Don't let the fact that you don't know right now what you're going to be doing in space limit yourself from dreaming about what you could do. Oh, and also follow what's happening with venture capital in space. There are the space angels and there are venture capitalists, especially in the US. I mean, venture capital pours billions of dollars, right? They just into commercial space activities, companies and things like that. And there are going to be failures, right? But understanding as an entrepreneur, there are going to be failures, but if you've got an idea, if you're a money person, figure out how to get into venture capital. Find your passion related to the space realm. Like, could I develop an engine for space travel? Nope. I know that I have a very strong limitation right there. But you know what? I can help develop law and policy surrounding space travel and integration into what we're doing in the future with exploration. And I can try to help move the direction of space in a way that is beneficial.
My question, knowing that all of these things are going to be necessary, how do we get more girls engaged in this idea, STEM, space? Talk about your experience. I'm sure there have been many rooms that you've been the only woman in, and talk about that. How do you move through that world and get on the other side of it, having something to contribute like you do, but speak to what is kind of required emotionally, what is required in terms of confidence, a seat at the table, all of that. What does that look like? Because as we talked about earlier, those laws have not been written. So there's not going to be a Me Too in space yet, because we're going to have to create it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what does that look like as a woman in this field?
Well, things that I think can help promote STEM in space. I think a cultural change in hands-on activities for girls. And this is a question I struggle with. How do we move forward with promoting space and getting more girls involved? Because we definitely need women. I mean, women are more than half the population of the Earth. We are going to need both men and women in space, and finding out what it takes to give that spark to girls to say, you have the capability, you can learn and grow and have a place in space. And I think there's been the idea that this is a boys only club. And, bringing up Me Too, when you've got this toxic culture of not addressing damages that are occurring, not only not addressing, but not holding accountable entities who are causing damage, and creating a culture of silence when this whole toxic undercurrent is happening. We have real danger of limiting ourselves long term because we're just allowing that to continue.
But then there's also the idea of diversity too. It's like
right.
Everyone needs to be represented in space. Like I always talk about how when I was growing up, we would all watch Star Trek reruns, right? And so we were all, as a woman of color, excited to see Uhuru. Everyone is kind of represented and has the opportunity to participate, so that we're not in a situation where the rich people are in space and then the poor people are down here on Earth breathing smog through a gas mask. So with that being said, these conversations are really important in the context of business, because it's like a new world that's dawning. And I just feel like if we don't talk about it and really take it out of the realm of science fiction, then it will be a reality for people that when they're finally hit with it, they're just like completely unprepared for it, and they're not going. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up about taking out of the realm of science fiction and bringing it to reality. A friend of mine, Dr. Lisa Hill, when we first met and I talked to her and I said, I just love space. I love being in space. Space is so sexy. And she said to me, well, my goal is to make space every day and to make it so that our interactions with space aren't sexy, but they are touchable and reachable and accessible. And to me, that was like a light bulb. Right. Because I do love space, and it's exciting. And, men and women, when I meet them, that's a huge topic of conversation. I could talk for hours about it, but realistically, if we could make space accessible, then we give that to the kid that may think that previously that it's been unattainable. Each side has talking points, with regards, or, various sides have talking points with regards to space and the money that's being spent on space. And all this money is going towards space, and there's not money going to feed people. Which is legitimate. It is legitimate. It's a very legitimate concern. But I think that there can be a balance, and we can try to find a balance. Some of the things that have come out of space exploration and accessibility have been shock absorbers for buildings that protect from earthquakes. These shock absorber capabilities could be used in those countries that may not have the infrastructure set up to really protect their civilians when things are happening. So we can blend, and I think there's the capability of blending our use and access of space with our needs here on Earth.
Thank you, Rebekah, so much.
Oh, thank you.
I'm Evelyn Brooks, and you've been listening to Built by a Boss. I hope you enjoyed the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite place. If you like what you heard today, please consider giving us a 5-star review and a comment. You can also follow us on Instagram at Built by a Boss, visit our website, and join our private Built by a Boss Facebook group to learn more about our guests and connect with listeners just like you.